Welcome to Business Acceleration Playbook. And today I am excited to talk to actually a good friend of mine, Pat Frew. We're doing this Build Better, Not Bigger series. And if you don't know me, I'm your host, Maria Daniels. And this show is actually about doing things a little bit differently, doing growth a little bit differently, because we're not chasing vanity metrics. We're not chasing bloated overhead. We're talking about scaling with purpose, staying rooted in what matters, and building something that is actually sustainable. And like I said, I'm joined today by my friend, Pat Frew. He's the executive director of the Covington Business Council and the host of Inside Covington. So Covington, Kentucky, if you don't know anything about it, it's had its own unique history, but in recent years, it's made some incredible intentional moves. And I've been thrilled to kind of be on the backseat, kind of watching some of that. It's becoming a model for cities and businesses all over the world, actually, and building business communities that want to grow with meaning. So, Pat and the Covington Business Council, CBC, have been at the heart of that shift and focusing on the connection, the collaboration, and the vision that puts people on purpose before just expansion. So I want to let Pat dive in and kind of introduce himself a little bit more, and then we'll dive into what growing better really looks like.
Hi, Maria, and thank you for having me on the show. I greatly appreciate it and appreciate your friendship as well. So I've been running the Covington Business Council. Come August of this year will be for 15 years. I was 50 years old before I figured out what I should have been doing my whole life. And that's why, even though I will be of retirement age later this year, I'm not quitting. I'm not stopping. So we still have a lot of work to do, and I think I can continue to add value to the Covington Business Council. So I started in 2010. And for those people that know about Covington's meteoric growth that you kind of alluded to, that was about 2 years before it all started happening. So back in those days, people had to take your word for it to say, Covington is really going somewhere, because what you had at that point, even in 2010, was you had a number of small business owners that felt, whether it was legitimate or not, it was legitimate in their eyes, felt very jaded about the city, felt like the next time the city says these great things are happening, I'm not going to believe it any more than the 15 times you said it before. So yeah. there was a lack of credibility there. And so when I started running the CBC in August of 2010, I would go up to businesses and I would say, hey, I'm part of the Covington Business Council. We're a membership-based business advocacy organization. Think Chamber of Commerce. We would love for you to belong. What do you think? And they said, no one's ever asked me before. So we started growing even before the city did. About 2 years later, one of the first big dominoes to fall was the announcement of the development of Hotel Covington at 7th and Madison, which is kind of in ground zero in the middle of the central business district in Covington, Kentucky. For people outside of Covington, and I know you have viewers, listeners all over, we're the largest city in northern Kentucky. Covington has a great vantage point from Cincinnati. As I like to say, all the great money shots of Cincinnati's downtown skyline come from Covington. And so we are that close to downtown Cincinnati. And that's something that we probably have not taken advantage of over the years, but it is starting to happen. There have been a number of big development projects since Hotel Covington, literally hundreds of millions of private dollars invested in our central business district. And the biggest one is going on right now, Covington Central Riverfront, where the old Internal Revenue Service Processing Center was before they announced that was closing in 2014. So this will be a brand new community for Covington. It's not just a new business district. It'll literally be a community, a mixed use development, residential, both condos and actual standalone homes, as well as mixed retail business. It's probably not going to be a large facility. It's going to be a large facility in space, but not tall skyscrapers or anything like that. And also earlier you talked about how Covington has kind of reinvented itself as a city and actually has really put itself in the driver's seat when it comes to development. So the Covington Central Riverfront project, which is about 250 acres, is happening with the city of Covington actually being the developer of record. Usually what happens in a city is it hires a developer, a private sector for-profit developer that comes in and plans the whole project. And Covington wanted to maintain control there. They are working with larger developers, but they're also working with people that have put sweat and equity into the city in terms of development. So they have local developers as well as, more regional, national developers, which should really give the site itself a little more character and not make it as homogenous as some big development projects can be. So that's a mouthful. So I'm going to stop talking and answer any questions you have from there.
No, I mean, I think that's great. And, obviously I love Covington, it has been, it's funny because, you and I have had this conversation, but I'm a member of a lot of different places, but there's always been something about Covington that just keeps pulling me right back. And, it's interesting to be able to see the growth that has happened because, like you said, they're not throwing up skyscrapers, but there's so much energy that's happening in that area. And I've felt it from the beginning and I was drawn to it. And I think that's where a lot of people, if they're not from there or they haven't been there very often, they could be questioning like, what the heck is even, going on? I always find it funny that people that are like way far away that have no idea about the area at all are surprised to learn that the Cincinnati airport is actually in Northern Kentucky. That is always like people that fly into the Cincinnati airport are very confused when they figure out that they're not in Ohio at all. They are actually in Northern Kentucky. And so it's interesting just the dynamic and there have been so many new establishments that I've seen go in, new projects that I have seen happen since I've kind of been a part of that area. And one thing that I can say especially traveling and being all over the places, I've never quite seen anybody do it like Covington. And that's a compliment. There is so much intention that is put into the decisions on what is happening and so much decision that is put into who all it affects, not just the big names, right? But also the small entrepreneurs, the startups. And there's a lot of projects going on that are specifically for those types of entities as well, which I think, in my opinion, that, is kind of under tapped in a lot of other areas. And I think that is, one thing that, helps Covington have that strong sense of identity. With that being said, I know you kind of shared a lot about, a lot of the projects going on and, all of that, but with the evolution that's happened, what do you think that Covington has, kind of brought to the table as far as kind of that whole concept of build better, not bigger? Because you even mentioned about how, the goal was never the skyscrapers, right? It was intention.
Right. Yeah. Covington takes great pride in the fact that they do not embrace brands in terms of, the Walmarts and Targets of the world, that people come there wanting a unique experience. Before I worked for the CBC, I was the communication director for the Northern Kentucky Convention Bureau for about 7 years. And that unique experience is something that, that they always want to give to visitors. So Covington's motto is kind of unapologetically Covington. And they have an awards program every year for some of their offbeat kinds of initiatives, and it's called the Authenticity Awards. So it's kind of a takeoff on being authentic, but it's about the city, and it's a way that Covington is different. So that has always, worked well for the city because, again, people want that unique experience, and by giving it to people straight, which is really what you get in Covington. They kind of, take great pride in being authentic. And so it's worked very well for them.
Well, and, as somebody that is coming to an area, if I can see, you mentioned Walmart, if I can go to Walmart right here, why am I going to go to Walmart there? So I think, that is a unique approach that I really think other areas really, need to look at. I do want to shift to the CBC for a little bit, because obviously I'm a member. It's my favorite. I mean, I tell anybody, like, there's a lot of great ones out there, but CBC is definitely one that I felt the most connection with. And, with the CBC and how it's kind of approaching, working, in that community, how does it, bridge that gap between civic and business goals?
Sure. So one of the things that is kind of a dichotomy about our organization is Covington's in our name. I used to get questions all the time. Well, my business isn't based in Covington. It's based in Russellville, Ohio, or wherever. Can I be a part of the CBC? I don't really get that question anymore because our membership has evolved so much. We have almost as many members in Ohio and in other parts of Northern Kentucky as we do Covington-based businesses. Yeah. So I think some of that is because people are attracted because of all the great growth and Covington's reputation and the way that it approaches business, all the things we've talked about. But I would also argue it's kind of the way the CBC is run. And when I took over 15 years ago, I realized we're not trying to compete with groups like the Northern Kentucky Chamber or the Cincinnati Chamber. How could we? I mean, we have 3 employees and they have a lot more. I won't even go into the numbers. And why would we want to recreate the things that they do well, such as they have a women's program that's second to none, really good. Cincinnati has been doing a lot of research related to business, some things that, we couldn't begin to do. So we're into really more blocking and tackling and helping small businesses grow and helping them to make the connections they need to grow and achieving the goals that they have based upon why they joined to begin with. And so with us, that means just making connections. I think that kind of touches on your experience, Maria, about why you come back to Covington. It's because it's a group of people, especially our best connectors, who are all in on helping others before they receive a thing. And they love to connect. They love to be a resource. And they love to see your business grow. And they hope that in some ways it will be reciprocated, but that's not a necessary factor in them trying to help and be all in and helping your business to grow. This wasn't something I created. It existed already, and we're just taking advantage of that. And that's what's helped us to grow. When I started, we had 130 members. Today, we have almost 550 members. We've grown 25% in the last year. If you look over our history, it's never been a giant arc up. It's always been kind of a gradual, continuation. And so, and when you talk about growth and controlling growth, that has kind of, taken over for us. So we have people that, join and don't engage, and oftentimes they don't stay. But we continue to work to find ways to provide value for people, even outside of attending the more than 100 events that we host every year. So we don't have it figured out. There are still things that I would like to see in terms of growth and keeping people, because it does truly affect me when we lose a member. I always say that my best day is when I get a new member. My worst day is when I lose one. So, we would like everybody to engage, and it's not their intent to join and not get involved. But if they don't get involved as time goes on, eventually they say, it's kind of like the breakup with the girlfriend, and the person initiating it, takes all the responsibility. It's not you, it's me. But I still hate to see that. I would love for people to get more value, and I would rather not take their money than have them join in the first place if they weren't going to really take full advantage. But, that's the way life is. So.
Absolutely. Well, and I know, again, that connection with the CBC specifically, yes, Covington as a whole, but connection with CBC specifically is definitely what keeps me coming back there. And I'll always be there. It is definitely different. The connection, it's different. And I know you don't like taking the responsibility for that, but I think you are a big part of that, because the energy that we put into something, I think does, very much show up in, what we're getting with our growth of, a project. So I know you're very humble pull on that, but I do think that you've done a great job.
Well, thank you. I mean, we should all be, I am very about the thing you're involved, and that is contagious. People's passion, light in their eyes, and right, I mean, a natural connector. That is one of the things that the good Lord put into my heart and my life. And, so I am well suited to do that. There are many more things I'm not well suited to do. And I've kind of proven that over the first half of my professional career, but I finally figured it out. Some people never do that. And I feel sorry for them because we should all, I feel like we should all, it's kind of a God-given inalienable right to work. And while we shouldn't be overly focused on work, we should have work that is fulfilling and meaningful in our lives. And I'm just so grateful that I have that in mind. So.
Absolutely. Well, I always say that people start a business because of the one or two things, or a career because of one or two things they do amazingly. And then they figure out very, very quickly all the things that they do not do amazingly. And I think it's getting to that level of maturity where you're like, you know what, this is probably not my thing, but that helps you hone in on your superpowers and the things that are your thing. So, I mean, I love that. I do want to mention, you launched a podcast called Inside Covington. Has that experience change how you connect with the community or how they see the work that the CBC is doing?
That's great. And we've just started. I've taped a whopping 2 episodes so far. So,
well, you know what? 2 is better than none. So that's great.
Yeah, I'm going to do a third one here in a few weeks. So what our goal is to actually try to give people more of an inside view of Covington, and not so much in terms of like a Wizard of Oz thing with the man behind the curtain and what he or she does, but just the fact that we do have a great deal of connectivity in the community. And one of the things I found about people in Northern Kentucky is because I'm not even a Kentucky resident like you. I'm an Ohio resident, but I have been embraced, and people really do. They don't care where you come from in the region as long as they know you're committed to the cause. And I've seen this in this job, the previous job at the Convention Bureau, and that's the other good thing. They don't hold it against you in terms of your street address or where you live or anything like that. If they can see that you're all in and that you want to help and you want to be a part of the community, you're embraced. And that's just one of the many great things about Northern Kentucky.
I would definitely agree with that. And good luck with the journey. Honestly, I didn't even know. It makes sense that you've only launched 2 because it was my team that was like, hey, he has I was like, oh. So I was like, well, we'll definitely ask about that because I feel awful that I haven't been paying attention because I didn't know.
Oh, well, you haven't missed much because I just started. So,
all right. Well, I will make sure and find it and follow along with that journey. While we're kind of on here, I do want to ask, you've been able to kind of see all of this, Covington in action. What advice would you take from that to give to other cities or even maybe business councils that want to take a more intentional approach to growth in their area?
Well, I would say, be true to yourself, do your research, talk to businesses, look at what has developed into something, and don't try to copy other people. From what I've seen very few failures on the part of Northern Kentucky and some of the things that they've done, but where I have seen it, it's where a group or an entity tried to copy something, say across the river or something like that. You have to go with what's endemic in your community and look at organically how you can take advantage of opportunities. And a great example of that right now is somebody well, Dave Knox with Blue North. Dave is doing great work, and he took over an organization. Well, Blue North was started by him, but he kind of took a look at the areas where Northern Kentucky has a lot of great opportunities. Some established businesses that have some potential for instance, franchising and things like that. So that's one area they focus on. Obviously, there is a big entrepreneurial bent in Northern Kentucky when you look at DAV and how they turn former veterans into entrepreneurs. NKU has a very strong entrepreneurial program. And so, and there are other examples in Northern Kentucky where if they really closely follow the ways of Northern Kentucky and the things that work here, they're a lot more successful.
Absolutely. Well, and it's one of those things you can go and get inspired and learn from what somebody is doing somewhere, and you take that knowledge and that inspiration and then create something of your own. And I mean, I think that is the best way to do that, to be able to create something that's sustainable in your area with your own personality and makes it, unique as well. So how about for any business owners that are listening right now? Like, how can they kind of take that same concept and apply it to how, to grow their own business, their own organization?
That's a great question. I think a lot of it, sometimes people don't trust themselves. They need to trust their gut. And as I like to say, that's the biggest part of my body. So it should carry some weight in more ways than one. But I think that we need to trust in what we know has been true. We need to, just within that authenticity, to also look for, ways that you can differentiate yourself from other areas. And I mean, look at how successful Northern Covington is with the quirkiness. I mean, they didn't invent that. I mean, Austin, Texas invented that. They've been doing that for decades, but they kind of have their own way of positioning it so that people enjoy that. Covington is also a home for creatives, people that do what you do, because of that, because they're true to themselves and they kind of create their own spirit, so to speak, marching to their own beat. So that attracts folks like that. So and I think you're never going to be successful pretending to be something you're not. So authenticity is really a central point that you need to continue to focus on, I believe.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, and that's something that sometimes I think that comes with age and figuring out, like I know it did for me, like figuring out, it's kind of that old saying that why are you trying to, do all these things to impress people that you really don't like, and it's kind of that concept that, if you are secure in yourself and what you do, that will take you, all the way. And what you find out too, is that also allows other people to completely step into who they really are too. So I love that. That's great. I know we're wrapping up here, but I do want to ask, I know, obviously Covington Business Council is a local, entity. So if somebody is in the region, they can go to the website to be able to find out more about all the great work that CBC is doing. And if you are, in the vicinity, even in the near vicinity, I would strongly encourage you to check it out. Like I said, it is by far my favorite, group that I'm involved in. But I do want to mention also, since you got the podcast, where can people kind of follow along with that journey? And if there's anything else that you want to share.
Well, I don't know the exact link, but if you go on our website, www.cbcky.com, they can find out more about the podcast and link into that. And yeah, we are, interviewing community leaders. Like our first two interview subjects were the lady that runs the Northern Kentucky Port Authority, and they're the ones opening up the One NKY Center right now, Christine Russell. With BNKY, and then Susan Smith, who is the business attraction officer for the city of Covington. And, a lot of times people get enticed to a city by incentives and different things like that. And while Covington offers things like that, it's really, they try to focus more on the experience and how that's different from other cities. We've kind of talked about that. So that kind of is a reminder again, if you're a business, don't chase the money, find a place that is going to fit the vibe that you're seeking to create and where you can connect with others. So that's how people can find the podcast, and we'd love for them to follow along.
Well, and I think that exactly what you said kind of ties into the purpose of this series anyway, build better, not bigger, because, growth is great, but growth just for the sake of growth, you end up with something that is not sustainable and not unique and not really what anyone wants. And so, first of all, I want to thank you so much for being on here today. You're one of my favorite people. So I was like, oh, we got to ask Pat to come on. So I was excited that you joined us. And if you're listening and this is on the podcast, you're able to go down to the show notes and you can click on the link. You'll be able to kind of check out CBC and everything that they have to offer and find the podcast. And, this conversation that we had today really highlights, like I said, where we're exploring with that Build Better, Not Bigger series that we've been doing. That meaningful growth is the key. And that starts with clarity, because as you heard from Pat, Covington didn't blow things up or start from scratch. It's building on strengths and it's leaning into the community. It's, staying focused and focusing on the long game. So again, huge thanks to Pat Frew for being here and the role he plays in making Covington stand out as an example of what's possible when businesses and communities grow together. So if you want to learn more, again, click that link below and you'll be able to kind of check out the website, check out the podcast. And thanks for tuning in to Build Better, Not Bigger, which is part of our Business Acceleration Playbook. And we will see you next time.